Chapter 1. The Land Before Ambition. In the final years of the 19th century, when the American landscape was divided between rural quiet and rising industrial ambition, there lay a stretch of land untouched by the noise of factories or the pulse of cities. It rested just outside the growing towns of the Northeast, a place where lanterns still outshined electric bulbs, and where horse-drawn wagons carved the only paths through the tall grass. This tract of earth belonged to the Townsend family, an old, respectable name, though not one of extraordinary wealth. They were known in their county as modest landowners, firm in their principles, conservative in their tastes, and steady in their reputation. But as America moved toward a new century, toward railroads, electricity, and unprecedented wealth, something began to change within the lineage of the Townsends. And at the center of that transformation stood one man, Charles Edwin Townsend, the last person anyone expected to chase grandeur. Charles Townsend was born in 1862, the son of a quiet merchant who valued thrift and routine. His upbringing gave no hint that he would one day attempt to construct one of the most ambitious private mansions of the early 1900s. He was educated, soft-spoken, and cautious by nature. But the era he came of age in was not cautious at all. It was a time when fortunes rose overnight, when a new class of wealthy industrialists reshaped the American social hierarchy. Young Charles watched these men closely. He studied their estates, their lifestyles, and the power they commanded. And somewhere within him a seed formed, one that would eventually grow beyond reason. That seed was ambition. By the late 1990s, Charles Townsend inherited the family land. It was a quiet inheritance, far from any bustling city, far from the influence of high society. And yet the moment the property became his, he envisioned something extraordinary upon it. Not a simple home, not a refined farmhouse. He wanted a mansion that could rival the great homes of the Gilded Age, those vast estates built by industrial titans like the Vanderbilts, the Morgans, and the Astors. But Charles Townsend was not a Vanderbilt. He did not own a railroad, nor a steel foundry, nor a banking empire. What he did own was desire, and the belief that the new century would reward boldness. In 1898, Charles announced his intention to construct the grandest home his county had ever seen. Newspapers of the time made polite mention of a considerable undertaking, though few took the idea seriously. After all, many such projects began with enthusiasm and ended with modest, scaled-back results. But Charles was determined, and determination, when mixed with unchecked confidence, can often override caution. The land was surveyed. Architects were summoned from nearby cities, and for the first time in its quiet lifetime, the Townsend property shook under the footsteps of surveyors, draftsmen, and men who carried more imagination than sense. What Charles envisioned was not merely a residence, it was a monument, a testament to his arrival into a society he was never truly part of. He wanted a mansion with sweeping staircases, towering gables, and hallways so long that visitors would feel as though they had entered a world set apart from their own. He studied the great European estates and tried to fold each influence into his plans. English, French, Italian, Gothic, Romanesque, he wanted it all. In the newspapers of early 1900, a brief note appeared. The Townsend residence is expected to be of significant scale. No one reading that sentence could imagine what would come. a structure built beyond its budget, designed beyond its purpose, and doomed long before the first stone was laid. For now, the land remained quiet, but the blueprint for disaster was complete, and in the coming years, Charles Townsend's ambition would reshape not only the earth beneath his feet, but the destiny of his entire family. The Townsend estate was no longer just an idea. It was the beginning of a downfall that history attempted to forget.
Chapter 2. The Towns That Slipped Off the Map. Throughout the early 1900s, the American landscape shifted faster than the ink could dry on a map. Entire communities appeared in months, fueled by mining money, rail expansions, and aggressive boosters promising a modern frontier. And just as quickly, many of those places disappeared, leaving behind foundations swallowed by weeds and coordinates nobody remembers. Some of these towns collapsed in silence. Others vanished in a single violent moment. All of them reflect the volatility of a country still finding its balance between ambition and survival. 1. The boomtown built over hollow ground. A once thriving mining settlement rose on top of unstable tunnels carved out too aggressively by early extractive companies. Families built homes, storefronts expanded, and the main street became the symbol of new prosperity. Signs of instability started small: hairline cracks on porches, sidewalks that dipped gently like stretched fabric. The real collapse came without warning. Half the commercial district dropped straight into the earth, swallowing timber, glass, and brick in one motion. Residents evacuated within days, leaving furniture, signage, and tools behind as if time had stopped mid-sentence. Access is restricted today. The ground still shifts beneath the surface. 2. The flooded valley town. A planned dam project promised economic uplift and protection for nearby farms, but underestimations in structural integrity turned the installation into a hazard waiting for the wrong storm. When that storm arrived, the entire structure gave way. A wall of water tore through the valley, erasing homes, mills, gardens, and decades of community life. Wooden barns floated like driftwood. School desks bobbed through tree branches. Within hours, the town became a lake bed. Modern maps list the reservoir as a recreational area, but below the surface, outlines of roads, chimneys, and foundations still remain. 3. The community abandoned by the railroad. Rail lines dictated survival. A station stop meant commerce, foot traffic, lodging, and reliable supply chains. When a railway company realigned its route just a few miles away, the town that depended on it lost its lifeline. Shops shuttered within months. The school closed after enrollment dropped below viability. Houses were abandoned with curtains still hanging. Over time, the prairie reclaimed everything, leaving only weathered stone footings marking where the straits once ran. 4. The Double Fire Disaster. A small wooden settlement rebuilt itself after a major fire in the early 1910s, assembling new structures with optimism and borrowed funds. 2 years later, another blaze swept through, larger and faster than the first. The remaining residents lacked the resources and insurance support for a second reconstruction. The town charter dissolved quietly. Only an old iron water pump stands today where the main square used to be. 5. The settlement buried by dust. Before national awareness of soil exhaustion took shape, one Plains community was already fighting a losing battle with erosion. A massive dust storm transformed the area overnight, burying fences, darkening midday skies, and piling dunes against doorframes. Families migrated out as the land proved impossible to reclaim. Winds carried away the rest. What remains is a rippling field of sand where nothing marks the streets that once held wagons, harvests, and daily routines. 6. Why these disappearances matter. The early 20th century produced thousands of places built on hope, risk, and speed. Many succeeded. Hundreds did not. Their sudden erasures reveal how fragile communities could be in an era when environmental, structural, and economic stability wasn't guaranteed. These towns left behind no monuments, only traces, coordinates, and shadows of ambition.
Entire regions in the early 20th century operated in a constant state of reinvention. Industry expansion pushed frontiers outward, but the same rapid growth that built opportunity also exposed vulnerabilities. Town leaders often gambled everything on single industries, mining seams that ran dry faster than projected, rail depots that moved without warning, or farmland that couldn't survive environmental shifts. When a single pillar collapsed, entire communities followed, leaving blocks of empty homes behind, like a corporate office abandoned after a failed merger. Across forgotten valleys, fruit orchards once mapped along perfect geometric grids now sit beneath wild overgrowth, their patterns only visible from aerial views. Old brick chimneys stand alone in tall grass, silent indicators of kitchens where families gathered before disappearing into the migration waves of the era. Rusted horse rings remain drilled into stones that no longer sit in front of stables. Street names survive only in archived ledgers and yellowed newspapers held together by brittle fibers. In some rural districts, foundations remain lined up in precise rows, each representing a home that vanished during waves of drought or economic collapse. Town wells rest sealed under concrete slabs, marking where children once fetched water in tin buckets. Former schoolyards are now wheat fields, tilled over so many times that even locals forget they were ever anything else. Even today, plow blades occasionally reveal bits of porcelain, cut nails, or pocket watch fragments that remind farmers the land once belonged to a community wiped out by time, weather, or structural failure. Railway corridors, once the arteries feeding these places, still hold traces of their existence. Timber ties have rotted away, but faint imprints remain in the soil, stretching toward empty horizons. Telegraph poles lean at subtle angles, their wires long removed, but their shadows frozen in old survey photos. Where depots once channeled noise, foot traffic, and commerce, there now sit expanses of quiet grass, as if the land requested a return to stillness after decades of upheaval. Floodplains tell their own version of the story. In certain reservoirs, divers occasionally report spotting the outlines of submerged streets, stone steps leading nowhere, and iron fences coated in silt. Fish drift through what used to be living rooms. Water currents move past windows that once framed sunsets. The towns beneath these lakes remain some of the most preserved, accidental time capsules held underwater, untouched by modern development. In places swallowed by dust, the ground still carries the texture of former tragedy. Sharp ridges and wind-carved patterns trace the routes where families dragged wagons loaded with their remaining belongings. Coat buttons, scattered tin toys, and rust-bitten hinges surface after storms, resurfacing the memory of an exodus forced not by war or plague, but by an environment turning against its own people. These lost towns form an unofficial archive of the nation's early century risks. They show how ambition drove countless families to build futures in places that never received the long-term sustainability checks modern planners consider standard. Some failed through natural disaster, some through miscalculation, and some simply because they were on the wrong side of geography and corporate decisions. Yet each left behind clues, embedded in soil, stone, and submerged timber, giving today's researchers a fragmented but powerful look at communities that existed briefly before being reclaimed by the land.